Hello, everyone, and welcome. Happy Social Science Week. It is absolutely fantastic to have you here. Now, can I just double check? Can everyone see the screen? Okay, you can see the PowerPoint?
Yep, very clearly.
Yeah,
thank you.
Very good. Okay, fantastic. So thank you to Sturt University and the Institute of Land, Water and Society, and thank you to Anglican, New South Wales South, New South Wales West and ACT for actively supporting our Social Science Week event. Today we're sharing ideas about creating communities of hope in uncertain times. And I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement of country written by Christian leader, the Reverend Neville Naden and Bush Church Aid Society Indigenous Ministry Committee. We acknowledge the triune God, the creator of heaven and earth, and his ownership of all things. We recognise that he gave stewardship of these things upon which we meet to the First Nations people of this country. In his sovereignty, he has allowed other people groups to migrate to these shores. We acknowledge the cultures of our First Nations peoples and are thankful for the community that we share together now. We pay our respects to their elders and leaders, both past and present, and those who are rising up to become leaders. Well, welcome and thanks for joining us. And we're just going to ask if people could mute their microphones and temporarily turn off their videos. The reason for that is we're trying to maximise the bandwidth for everyone who's here so that they can see the videos, see the screens and hear us clearly. Also, just a little reminder to put your phones onto silent so that when you do ask questions, we don't get any ringtone in the background, please. We are going to be using the chat box as a personal reflection tool. So could you please add your general questions and comments to the chat box at the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for joining in this gentle conversation about community engagement. And just to let you know, we're recording the session and that the recording will be publicly shared. So I'll just introduce myself. My name is Dr. Monica Short, and I'm a social work lecturer and social science researcher with the Institute of Land, Water and Society at Sturt University. I work cross-disciplinary, translating knowledge from social work, sociology and theology. My work happens or is located in both secular and faith-based fields, and my work creates public platforms where people can come together and share their experiences of engaging in community. My topic today is community engagement, hope, forgiveness, and relationship, a social work, sociological, and theological conversation. And today I will be quickly introducing the cross-disciplinary integrated lens, which has a knowledge base in social work, sociology, and theology. And I'll be using this lens to introduce a cross-disciplinary understanding of community engagement and participation. In our public lecture this morning, I'll be referring to a case study to illustrate our points, and that case study is the Anglican Church and its agencies. In this talk, I'm proposing that a holistic understanding of hope, forgiveness, and reconciliation can expand ideas regarding community engagements. And if there's time at the end of the talk, at the end of Sarah's presentation, then together we'll all come and discuss how in solidarity we can create grassroots communities of hope in uncertain times. Our talk this morning honours and celebrates all actions that create communities of hope. And it is, I think, extra special to actually have something to celebrate right now during lockdown. And I think the work that you're doing is worth celebrating. So to help us orientate us to this topic, I've got a small clip to share, and I'm sharing it for educational purposes. So that means I can share it with all of you. However, I can't record it. So I'm going to temporarily pause the recording. So for those people who look at this recording later, you'll need to manually open up this link to see it. Did that resuming recording start again? That's good. I'd like to add an extra point to that clip, which is, I think community engagement is not in lockdown. So to help us immerse ourselves in the topic, I'd like to start with a critical reflection question. And I'm wondering if people could locate your chat function. It'll either be down the bottom or up the top. And in your chat box, in a word or two, just answer this question. In reflecting on our careers or our personal lives or through volunteering, what is one thing that you've done to engage others which makes you feel proud? And I'll just give you a moment to put those comments in. We've got conducting a choir. What a beautiful thing to be doing. Making a phone call. Listening. Masks, fantastic. They're beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Our personal challenge in this season of lockdown is to collectively begin to identify what we're good at regarding engaging others, such as the points that are coming up in the chat box. Our challenge is, how can we use these strengths to help meet our needs in local communities in this current uncertain time? These engagements, these strengths, your strengths, my strengths, our strengths, we can use our strengths to engender hope in our communities and give dignity to those around us. In returning to our topic, the themes that we're considering today are found in the focal point between social work, sociology, and theology. I call this focal point the integrated lens with an epistemological or knowledge base in social work, sociology, and theology. In this discussion, each discipline is equally important. For ease in this talk this morning, I'm sharing ideas in the order of the youngest discipline to the oldest discipline, starting with social work, then looking at sociology, and then theology. However, there is no order between the three disciplines. And why take this approach towards considering community engagement? Well, potentially this approach can provide a comprehensive understanding of engagement and participation. It ensures that what we're considering is grounded in ancient and contemporary knowledge about community engagement. This lens opens the opportunity to challenge artificial barriers that limit understanding. And importantly, it gives people from different disciplines the option to stand in solidarity with others from other disciplines. And together, we can unite to create communities of hope during uncertain times. In my research, I use this United Nations definition for engagement. Engagement is the seeking to address barriers and build the capacity and confidence of people to participate in and negotiate and partner with institutions that affect their lives. I think this definition is helpful because it builds people up and it gives us the freedom to celebrate what is good about engaging, such as participation and the sense of belonging. This definition works for both secular and faith-based organisations. It incorporates the richness and variety of ways people engage. That is, through civic engagements, which are those engagements where citizens and organisations come together. Through faith-based engagements, which are engagements that are similar to other engagements but have the extra dimension of meeting spiritual needs. Through community engagements where citizens and organisations come together. Through writing, which is the engagement of ideas for sharing with others through publication. And socially, which are those engagements which create relationships and connections. Now, I'm wondering what sort of engagements or engagement are you involved in or would like to be involved in? And if we could go back to the chat box again, would you like to list what they are? Is it civic, community, faith-based, publication, or social engagements? And if you just want to list, and we'll see the range of people that we've got here today with us that are exploring together. Community, a lot of community, all fantastic. Social, community, wonderful. A bit of civic, that's great, fantastic. Now, there are many outstanding examples of engagement. Today, I'm focusing on community and faith-based engagements. Thinkers about these engagements often break them into different dimensions. Temple talks about human relationships, love and connection, social organisation, and political construction. For Christian churches and their agencies, Bonhoeffer highlights an extra dimension that's obvious from the name Christian, and it's the connection or association with Christ Jesus. As already mentioned this morning, I'm looking at the dimensions of community engagement cross-disciplinary. First, from a social work perspective. Social workers who are writing in this field highlight the importance of promoting bonding and belonging. Bonding and belonging ensure that people's being, their uniqueness, their essence, who they are, is respected. Belonging can feel great. Could you add in one or two words into the chat box what you think it feels like to belong in a group or in a community? Safe space, inclusiveness, valued, purpose, cared for, warm, connections. They're beautiful words, aren't they? Fantastic. Similar to many other professions, many social workers respectfully apply a holistic, person-centered, strengths-based approach and strive to create connections that bring hope. This occurs in multiple ways. For example, through creating opportunities for people to connect with others in their local communities, so they're not isolated. By creating opportunities for people to connect with organisations so people can receive support and assistance. And through creating opportunities to connect with organisations that promote their dignity and meet spiritual needs. Achieving this involves active listening, self-determination, genuineness, empathy, respectful communication, and empowerment of others. Social workers such as Hallahan argue for interventions that do more than meet minimum requirements or KPIs. They argue for social work interventions, regardless of the setting, that result in building the capacity for hope, that result in the liberation of people, that result in the establishment of justice. Next, let us consider some sociological thinking about community engagements. Sociologists provide valuable insights into how society works and how we engage others. Sociologists often start with the idea that people are social creatures who engage with each other. Many sociologists consider that society shapes our engagements. Sociology can help us make sense of how we connect with others, and this shaping can sometimes result in helpful and sometimes unhelpful connections. Positive engagements can lead to kindness and a willingness to care for others and to take responsibility for others. Regarding the church and its agencies, their engagements with local communities, there is an extensive number of connections between a church and its local communities, or between an agency associated with the church and its local communities. And we can observe these connections sociologically, and we can note how these connections can bring hope. And I've got quite a few examples up on that PowerPoint, but I'm only going to highlight two because we don't have a lot of time. So two examples we can observe sociologically are we can observe activities that promote social cohesion and harmony and help us understand life, such as found in the local church or through chaplaincy. We can sociologically observe acts of volunteering, resulting in identifiable roles and meaningful acts that help others. For example, Mothers' Union's activities, Friends of St. John's volunteering, disaster recovery teams, Bush Church Aid Nomads activities, CBM Luke 14 program activities, Church Mission Society volunteer activities, and the list goes on and on. Next, let us consider theology. Theology gives us a deeper understanding of what the church and its agencies, including the motivations behind why they engage with the local community and why they fundraise or provide services for people outside the church. For many Christians, community engagement is a logical extension of their faith in God. Please let me briefly explain this further theologically. It's based on this. God is relational. He chooses to engage with us. His creation is a system and everything is interconnected. We share life together and have responsibilities. If one suffers, others suffer. If one smiles, others smile. Christians engage in acts of love because of the nature of God, which is love. God demonstrates his love by sending his son Jesus into the world to live, die, and rise again. That is, regarding community engagement, Jesus entered into people's neighborhoods to engage with us. For those of us who read the Bible, it reminds us that Jesus teaches us to go beyond basic engagement. Rather, to love God and love our neighbours as ourselves. In other words, to engage with our communities collectively through our words and deeds. And theologically, by listening to those around us and sharing about our relationship with God through Jesus with others. So what does a social work, sociological, and theological perspective bring to our thinking about community engagement? Through my cross-disciplinary research, I'm proposing that when we partake in our day-to-day activities, that is, our professional practice, our volunteering, our work, our ministries, etc., in these very activities, that when we take time to engage with others meaningfully, we create hope. Our engagements can be holistic. We can aim to promote communities of hope respectfully, with deep warmth, and meet psychosocial, spiritual needs in uncertain times. And when and where are we to engage? Well, I think it's time to engage right now, or time to continue engaging, regardless of what's going on around us. Many continue to engage in lockdown and are doing beautiful grassroots activities that bring hope, and I'm cheering for these activities. In this uncertain time, I think we need to actively value, uphold, and celebrate all individuals and grassroots organisations, agencies and churches that promote communities of hope in uncertain time in our local neighbourhoods. And why celebrate? Why celebrate what we do to engage others? Well, holistic engagements can ensure culturally sensitive, active and deep listening occur. Such engagements can help us face together the complexities of our time: pandemic, fires, drought, poor air quality, hail, mouse plagues, health challenges, mental health challenges, and so on. Holistic engagements give people the freedom and time to authentically ask the big questions about life, including asking, why is this happening? What is eternal life? Authentic engagements nurture people so they can dream big dreams for themselves, so they can have their hope for a future respected, a good future, one where people are encouraged and loved and feel safe in community. Now, engagement is not easy, particularly when there is hurt, and it's well known that relationships are complex. When we're free to travel again, Sarah and I are hoping to go around to a number of community groups and talk about creating communities of hope and sharing a workshop about the role of forgiveness in relationships. Authentic engagements and relationships involve connecting with the fragility and frailty and failures of life. For example, I know I have deep and dark moments of regret, and possibly I'm not the only one here who experiences these moments. The act of forgiveness and reconciliation is an example of engaging regardless of the complexities and ugliness of life. It involves purging hurts. Heartfelt healing through forgiveness is an ancient biblical tenet, a sociological phenomena. And for social work, forgiveness in many circumstances can create the possibility of a new empowering narrative. Just think about the spiritual warmth of two or more souls connecting or reconnecting and allowing themselves to engage in a restorative relationship, one that has a safe future. Engaging in forgiveness in community is powerful. And can I encourage us that after this talk, that we take time and reflect on and recognize how can we engage others in a way that fosters healing, forgiveness, reconciliation, and interconnectedness, and wonder what does that look like in our situations, in our work, in our volunteering. Can we also take time to celebrate engagements and the people, teams, and churches and agencies that are engaging and are trying very, very hard in these uncertain times to make the world a better place for everyone? For example, can we celebrate welfare assistance, pastoral care, grassroots community activities, knitting groups, men's sheds, disaster recovery teams, running or participating in small groups, the teaching or sharing of skills and knowledge? Can we celebrate the kind words, the nurturing of dreams, the nurturing of Christian hope, the sharing of the Bible, the church groups, the praying, the holding of each other in our thoughts, and hoping that everybody is flourishing? Can we celebrate any action that gently wraps spiritual warmth around human need or fear or isolation? And can we celebrate any activity that builds a good future? Can we cheer loudly for people, especially when they achieve psychosocial spiritual achievements in their lives and meet their milestones? Can we cheer loudly when people take a step that promotes their own flourishing. And so to conclude, please remember I'm cheering for all of us as we together engage our communities through our work, personal life and volunteering. Engagement is essential work, and every time you engage, you are creating space for hope in uncertain times. In this talk, I have highlighted the power of engaging with others during uncertain times from a social work, sociological, and theological perspective. I'd like us to take a moment and to return to the clip I showed at the beginning. So I'm just going to pause the recording again.
Direct neighbour. A snapshot of this direct particular neighbourhood for loving your neighbour was across the road was our local lady of the night, and who often would need some support and help on Sunday mornings to rest and recover. So she would ask us to take her children to Sunday school to give her that chance to have a break. On the other corner of our neighbourhood was a young man who'd been in a car accident and who lived life in a wheelchair. And many ways were given to him when he came out in the front yard on rare occasions. On our right-hand side, we had a lovely Indigenous family whose both parents struggled with diabetes. And so my mum, being a nurse, would often help with insulin injections whenever it was needed. Next to them was an elderly couple, and they always knew when the kettle was boiled, and they'd come over for a cup of tea and a chat. And across the other side of the road was our Czechoslovakian family, who I loved, have fond memories about dyeing boiled eggs with and colouring them for Easter each year, and having so much fun in our greetings of smashing them together. As a church family, loving our neighbour was also taken very seriously, and it became evident in the way of supporting the refugees in the Villawood Detention Centre. We saw that there was a real need in our immediate area and a need for connection. After asking what would be helpful, we opened up the church and the church hall each Saturday for opportunities to eat together, for opportunities to play music and to have cultural celebrations. As these days grew, the demand grew and the need for transport grew. It was a real problem and a real issue. So what did the church family decide to do? It decided to get the contract for the Granville Speedway. So early every Saturday morning for 2 years, lots of the church family and my family went to Granville Speedway and cleaned up the speedway, collected beer cans, and boy, they stunk as a young child, and saved up enough money to buy 2 buses to pick up the families and individuals in the detention centre for these Saturday gatherings. Can you imagine a poor working class church with no money setting their minds and their goals to generously rally around to offer love and care for those in need at the Villawood Detention Centre? Both my parents were also involved in the Granville train disaster. Mum caring for the injured as a nurse, and my dad as a minister consoling the families of those who had died or were dying. I watched them go down the concrete slab into the mess below. I must say, loving your neighbour, and as I watched them, learning that loving your neighbour was sacrificial. It was difficult and it was beautiful all at the same time. Another inspiration in my formative years was Reverend Ivan Kilbert, who was a family friend and who also was a minister and retrained as a sociologist. He was invited by a church to do a community research project in the 1990s. He began to work with the community to understand their needs. He would interview the local police on the major crime issues. He'd interview all the local business leaders, the community health leaders, and he'd provide a social analysis to that particular church. He discovered that the community had over 20 halfway homes for young adults with disabilities. He talked with the young adults and the families, And they shared that it was really difficult to find somewhere to go, and especially somewhere that was geared for wheelchairs. They could just spend time together away from the other residents in their homes. It was an issue affecting approximately 100 families, nearly 400 to 500 people in that local community. The church shared they had no idea that this need existed in their community, and it was a unique need specifically to them. The local church began to think about ways that they could serve the needs of the residents of these 20 homes and their families with their own resources. An NGO agency began to partner with this local church to help support them and care for the unique way that they needed in this community. And until this research was actually conducted, was a hidden need. When agencies and the local church work together and value each other's roles, it helps with that connectedness towards a common good to create communities of hope for everyone in their community. In recent years, the summer bushfires of 2019 and 2020 were the most devastating and destructive bushfires to hit our nation in modern times. And the south coast of New South Wales was one of the hardest hit areas. Tragically, on the south coast of New South Wales alone, 6 people lost their lives. Over 1,200 homes were burnt to the ground, and a further 600 homes were badly damaged, and millions of hectares of natural wildlife habitat were destroyed. Anglican's Bateman's Bay Disaster Recovery Team comprised of 27 local parish volunteers, and they were led by the stoic 70-something Margaret Browning. They were the first South Coast team to be activated in response to a fire between Bateman's Bay and Braidwood on the 19th of December 2019. Unbeknown to them at that time, this amazing team would go on to spend the next 85 days providing care and support to their fellow community members across both evacuation and recovery centres, until becoming the very last volunteer team to be stood down on the 13th of March 2020. Across this extraordinarily long activation period, the Bateman's Bay DR team was directly engaged in providing support and material aid to over 5,000 evacuees. Incredibly, by the end of the Black Summer fire activation period, this relatively small team had contributed over 2,000 volunteer hours with so much care, so much listening, and so much support. In the last 2 weeks, a Dubbo Aboriginal woman is concerned about the rapid spread of COVID in her own area, has sparked a grassroots action to protect at-risk community members in her community. Knowing the vulnerability of the First Nations people in her city, Serena Harris has led an initiative to get together packs with masks and hand sanitisers and correct information about testing and vaccination. With private and agency donations and support from fellow parishioners from the Dubbo Anglican Church, 2,000 kits have been assembled as part of the First Nations Emergency COVID project. She says the immediate ability to be able to mobilise a local church community has been instrumental. She just knew what was needed. And as she witnessed people on the streets without masks and thought to herself, what's going on? Then working with some skilled individuals in the community, Ms. Harris was able to have the information printed in a way that communicated appropriately to her First Nations people. She says it's alarming that the virus has taken hold in her community, but the word is spreading. Locals want to do the right thing by their neighbour, and the help is amazing, she said. Grassroots, community connection. Out at Bathurst, we have an Anglicare community hub near the cathedral, Bathurst Cathedral. Anglicare's community chaplain Barry Porter shares this story. The front door swings open and a man runs in and announces, "Did you hear that Bathy was bashed twice and is in hospital?" Bathy is one of the favourite community members who walks around town with a rat called Mickey on his shoulder, his best mate. He buys a new $5 heavy metal band shirt from the discount shop every morning, so he doesn't have to wash his clothes, and he donates that T-shirt to the op shop for the next day when he buys his next new one. Bathy gets arrested every second week and is bashed every third week. He mumbles and he stumbles his way around town, but when you get to know him, you see his heart and you can't help but love this guy. He's always on the cusp of death from violence or his own lifestyle catching up with him. He comes in to feel love and to care. The team offers him to top up on some food, to grab a hot chocolate, and to vent about his dogs being stolen or cry about his parents not letting him come home and visit. The next day, the centre opens again and Bethy comes in with his carer. He looks better. He's eating and going to appointments. His apartment has been cleaned. His rat Mickey had gone missing but came back and had 9 babies. It turns out that Mickey is actually Minnie. This drop-in place for Anglican's chaplaincy and linkage services is a place of social inclusion. People know at this service they'll get tea, coffee, bananas, bread, a hot toasted sandwich, and a dedicated ear to listen. There is nothing tokenistic in these interactions as the genuine connections with the wider mob and are part of the Bush Telegraph to make sure if anyone is sick or falling through the cracks, with consent and permission, we know who to let know in the outback. On occasions, we've taken other family members with us from Orange to Ralston to bring home a homeless cousin being cared for by a community member in Candos or to get them back into their family community. This all happens through the ER networks and our volunteers, knowing who these community members are and what is going on and what the deeper needs are. Connections that bring about safety nets for these vulnerable people. In terms of community hubs and the long-term impact of COVID outbreak, in the recent lockdowns in New South Wales and ACT have seen a repeat of anxiety experienced in the first lockdowns of 2020. Families can't leave their homes, people living alone are left further isolated, and those who are vulnerable are struggling the most. People come to emergency relief services for help wearing T-shirts wrapped around their faces because they haven't been able to buy a mask, or asking for food which they have to eat while stranded in their cars as they have nowhere else to stay during lockdown. The local Anglican parishes and Anglican teams across the regions are working hard to remain a safe place and a haven for stability for people most in need, as are many non-for-profit church agencies and their partnered churches. But I want to share with you a story of Justin. Justin is in his early 40s and lives in Canberra. In the early 2020s, at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, he found himself struggling mentally and emotionally. The trauma of being alone was compounded by other circumstances in his life that had left him further isolated and feeling like he had no one to turn to for help. When he was at his lowest, Justin reached out to the team at Gordon Community Centre. The centre is based at the south of Canberra and runs a partnership between Anglicare and Lanyon Valley Anglican Church. Justin says, I knew the community centre had a food hub, so I came here using that as an excuse to ask for counselling because I was in such a bad spot, said Justin. There wasn't a counselling service offered, but one of the volunteers at the centre said, there's a minister here, you can talk to him if you like. Revd Jonathan Holt from Lanyon Valley Church was working at the Gordon Community Centre that day and was happy to meet with Justin. I could tell that Justin really wanted someone to talk to and connect with. He's such a generous guy who loves to care for people, and a genuine connection was clearly on his heart, recalls Jonathan. I knew I'd need to do a lot of listening and make it safe for Justin to share as much of his story as he wanted to. Jonathan made time to catch up with Justin for an hour or so each week, where they would discuss different issues. These catch-ups continued by phone during the COVID lockdown times, and Jonathan was surprised and encouraged by Justin's courage and dedication to meet up every week and to discover truths within the Bible that addressed his specific needs and circumstances. While most people who reach out to emergency assistance need food or help with bills, at Anglicare we know that often people are experiencing deep feelings of rejection, anxiety and disconnection. Many times this sort of need is hidden out of shame or anxiety. Anglicare, with the support of church partners like Lanyon Valley Anglican Church, want to see physical, emotional, mental and spiritual needs addressed. Justin says, coming to Gordon Community Centre was one of the best things I'd ever done. I've been speaking with Jonathan since 2020 and it still continues to this day. It's changed my life dramatically. Through Anglicare, I found my belief in God again. I'd lost my belief in everything. Just catching up with one person and discussing this one book has changed my life. Justin now lends a hand with all the events when we're able to out of lockdown and assisting as a volunteer. An estimated 80 to 100 people come through the Gordon Community Centre every month to receive food assistance, participate in playgroup activities or informal classes, and join the community lunches or catch-ups for a cuppa. All these activities are designed for the local area and to keep people connected with services and adapting and continuing even during those COVID lockdowns in whatever way they can. Justin says, I want other people to be a part of the centre in the same way. They can begin the step-by-step journey to healing and connection with others. Local volunteers with a heart for people in their area assisting at this centre give the building a warmth and a friendly atmosphere. Justin said, when I walk in each week, the volunteers know my name and call out hello to me, says Justin. Outside this building, people look down on me and I don't feel that I'm worth much. But when I come in here, I feel wanted and worthwhile. It shocked me at first. It's overwhelming. Many times the work of Anglicare is evident in tangible ways through food parcels, material aid, case management or referral services. But the work of Anglicare is also intangible. Justin's story is just one of many in Anglicare's services as a connection point where people can find healing in their own hearts, where their view of themselves and their outlook on life can be transformed in healthy and truthful ways. And for Justin, it led him to a renewed faith. Unconditional acts of love and messages of hope are freely given and with choice, agency and safety freely received. When you are vulnerable and in need, it's so important that no one uses a handout or a hand up to manipulate you. That is abuse. But by creating a safe space to ask, to share and explore questions, including questions of faith, becomes a crucial to reframing a marred identity or a self-belief that can be a profound source of care. Christ's ministry included words of hope, and that these words are part of a long-term holistic ministry. Rudy declares that sometimes personal liberation involves helping the poor to change the way they think about themselves, especially when they see their condition as fate or worse, divinely ordained. In a similar vein, Paulo Freire speaks in terms of a conscientisation of the poor, by which he refers to the fact that if the poor do not change their self-perception, they will never be free. Jarakuma Christian also speaks of transcending the marred identity of the poor. A conversion on this level means rediscovering the original design of creation in which people are called to be free, dignified and loving human beings. No matter who you are or where you come from as an individual or agency, there are no neutral messages that support why you care. Being authentic and genuine requires transparency, but at the same time, it must never be imposed. The sacred text of Christians, the Bible, records incredible stories of transformation because people encountered Jesus. Their life is radically changed, no matter how complex their lives were. The greatest commandment to love the Lord your God and to love your neighbour is the foundational invitation to connectedness of right and just relations. In recent years, diverse fields of research support the place of connection and community. The Australian Educational Commission conducted a 10-year longitudinal study and research into the wellbeing for children. Its results highlighted connectedness as the critical protective factors for resilience. Rather than risk elimination, what is the best way to protect the hearts and minds of people? The top 5 protective factors of the connectedness were connected to school, connected to peers, connected to teachers, connected to spirituality, connected to at least one caring adult. It does take a village to raise a child, and they deserve all our partnering efforts. When we come together as grassroots local churches and agencies, we can create communities of hope in uncertain times. Disconnect and isolation undermine right relations. And I've worked on a partnership pathway for local churches and communities to offer one example of how this can be framed. It's an integrated model that contributes to a culture of well-being for all as partnerships are explored, valued and navigated. I want to conclude with this quote from UNICEF research titled Partnering with Religious Communities for the Sake of Children. Religious communities are uniquely positioned to promote equitable outcomes for the most vulnerable children and families. Their moral influence and extensive networks give them access to the most disenfranchised and deprived groups, those that international organisations and governments are sometimes less able to reach effectively. They are also grounded in philosophical frameworks that shape their call to community service into long-term commitments to achieving peace, justice and social equity. Strengthening connectedness through partnerships across agencies in local communities and local church builds communities of hope in these uncertain times. I'd like to close with a prayer, and it's a Christian prayer. It's called the Serenity Prayer. It's been used in soup kitchens. It's been used in AA meetings of all types over many, many decades. It's a prayer of connection and resilience. And you're most welcome to observe this prayer or to participate in it as you are most feeling comfortable. It says this: God, grant me the serenity to see things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as a pathway to peace, taking as he did this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make things right if I surrender to his will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever and ever in the next. Amen.
Amen.
The person that Christians follow is a God whose character is one of love and hope, as Monica has shared. And this verse that I have from the sacred text for Christians, the Bible says this: because we know that suffering produces perseverance, and perseverance character, and character hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. It's my hope and my prayer that this may have sparked a thought of connection for your mind today. I'd like to hand back over to Monica, and thank you so much for sharing and listening with us this morning.
Thanks, Sarah. That was beautiful. And thank you, everyone. We're coming to the end of our time now. So for those who need to go, you're very welcome to go. But before you go, would it be okay if you fill in this, this quick evaluation link for us? And for those who want to stay around and talk for a little while, that's absolutely fine. And we've got a discussion question that we can chat as well. So on that note, can I try and get this, sorry. No matter how many times you practice, there's always something that will go wrong on the day. Oh, fantastic. Someone's got the link up. So yeah, if people could go in and fill in the evaluation, it'll literally take 1 or 2 minutes to fill in. That would be great. And can I just say, happy Social Science Week. It has been wonderful, absolutely wonderful to spend this time with you. And we hope you have a wonderful, highly connected week with lots of feelings of belonging and bonding. And on that note, I'm just going to stop the recording. And if you'd all like to turn on your video and can unmute yourself and we can have a little chat.